Hi everyone, I hope you're all well. I'm really excited to look at lots of Madeleine Vionnet drafting tutorials and patterns with you this month. I thought today I talk a bit about her drafting style in general and also look at her book and some of her more famous styles. I'm going to try to do at least 3 tutorials. 2 I've already planned out fully. Of course, I'd like you to choose one as usual, and then I see whether I can do some more guides as well. I absolutely adore Vionnet, but when I was trying to plan the tutorials for this month, it's actually quite tricky because it is 1930s. A lot of it is very couture and some of it looks very 1920s, 1930s. So I've tried to choose styles which you can adapt for yourselves. So I have actually chosen some really famous styles, but in the tutorials I'm going to sort of show you how you can adapt it to your own style and also for different garments. And I'm also going to talk a bit about how other designers have used similar techniques as her. What Vionnet is really famous for is draping on the body and really understanding fabric really well. So it's very much inspired by sort of a lot of classical costume, but also traditional garments, so from the kimono, but also Central European garments and even religious garments such as the monk's habit. Sort of looking at the history of clothing to a certain extreme, but then updating it for her time. And she worked very much with geometric shapes and also with both the straight grain and the bias. And a lot of her stuff is hand stitched and embroidered, so some of it is quite tricky to recreate, especially if you want to make stuff you wear every day. But the sort of shapes she works with is the square used on the bias, but then she's also done something and her most favorite dress, the handkerchief dress, is based on these shapes, and I've got a tutorial for that because that's such an iconic style you can update for yourself. So she worked with a square, but then she also worked with quarter circles or quatrains. So if you have a square and you cut it, if you have a big square and you fold it in quarters, if I can do it, and then you basically you turn it into a quarter circle. So the center of your circle is here, and then it's got curved hem and it's cut on bias again. She did styles like that, and what she did quite a lot is to slash styles to create shaping, and she also sort of used twisted fabric which moved around the body. But she also did actually stuff, geometric shapes used on the straight, and I'm going to do a series on how you can create this sort of geometric style collage tops, I call them, which she did, Delano did. It's sort of been reinterpreted through the decades quite a lot. And the last thing she did as well, she used bias with all the seams being on the straight. So this is actually a Pierre's Vionnet design, which is late 80s, early 90s. And it's slightly more conventional, but it's basically, if you've seen sort of classic shift dresses, it's very classic shift bias dresses. The seams always, I try to avoid using them, but both Vionnet, Dior has done it recently, and Pierre's Vionnet did. They made the seams part of the designs. So I'm going to show you one week how to do that, where you get lots of really nice diagonal designs. But the clever part is when you start adding shaping and volume, so flares. So you can really play around with that. And I've looked through some of my pattern cutting books and I haven't seen that. Bias seems to be always sort of treated very conventionally. And I thought lastly it also might be quite nice to look at some more designers who've used geometric shapes quite interestingly, like there's a very interesting Madame Gray style as well, and a few more. It's basically very, it's sort of quite also what you see in a lot of Japanese sort of contemporary designs, where they use the fabric quite cleverly and they go with the shapes rather than with the bodice block pattern. So it's sort of the same sort of inspiration of traditional cultural clothing, both Vionnet and net. But today I thought I'd look at a few images from the Madame Vionnet book by Betty Kirk I have, and sort of just show you some of the principles, and also talk about why some stuff is quite hard to translate to drafting yourself. This is my Vionnet book. There are a few, I think were all quite good. I like this because it has some patterns in it which can help you understand some of the more complicated designs. Some people don't like it because it hasn't actually got diagrams which explain to you how patterns are made, but I quite like that sort of a little bit of help and when you puzzle it out yourself. And I just want to show you to begin with a picture of Madame Vionnet, and this is very much how she worked. So just pieces of fabric on an anatomical doll, and that's why her work is so beautiful. But that's also the reason why quite a lot of it is quite hard to recreate through flat pattern cutting, because if you drape, you end up with very organic designs, while this, by working off a block flat, you're always trying to sort of make things cleaner, neater, straight lines, right angle. But if you drape, of course, you end up with some very bizarre shapes, but which work beautifully. So I'm just going to show you first of all a few of her sort of really iconic designs. And this is a black dress, which is very famous, but it's sort of that very always silk cut on bias with these sort of ties weaving around the body, quite often flares. Sort of typical 1920s shapes, and I think she only worked for about 20 years, maybe 30 years, but she created more than 12,000 garments. So if you think about, she started in 1907 when you still had the Edwardian corset, and then throughout her career she had that sort of typical 1920s, not very fitted, what we think of sort of flapper dresses, but I know they're not flapper dresses, but it's the same sort of thing where you move away from the body, you let the garment is much more drapey, and then towards the end she creates more fitted but still quite organic garments. So this is one of the dresses based completely on squares, for example. I'm going to show you how to do a similar version of this on Friday. This is based on the quadrants, on quarter circles, which are then tied at the top. So you can see it's sort of both on bias, but different outcomes. And again on bias, but this beadwork. And she was very famous for embroidery as well. One thing I really like about her, which isn't as famous probably as much, is like she worked very much with sort of, not with futurists, but she some of her work is sort of influenced, and it also reminded me very much of Sonia Delano, but it is where you look at geometric shapes. So whether that's, again, squares added at a bias, so you get geometric shapes, or whether it's sort of decorations where it still stays sort of, it's a bit like Schiaparelli, it's a bow, but it's fake, so it's a applique, so it looks like it's a 3D bow, but it's all cut into the pattern. Or whether it's tops like this, and I'm going to make a tutorial on how you create tops like this in similar outfits, and you can sort of get quite different designs by doing it on this straight of grain, or by flipping the whole thing round to the bias and making it move. So that was sort of one of her styles, which I think you can really adapt in everyday tops. Maybe not a whole dress, but you can take pieces which suit you. And then of course she did all these sort of really classical drapes, and I think these are really, you can copy, if you're really interested. I put one up for the Patreon's choice, I think they're quite hard because they're quite basic shapes, and then it's all about draping the top section. So I've sort of stayed away from it. It's the same as this dress. It's basically just a bias cut dress, but then it has the tie going around, which makes most of the impact. So if we can look at the sort of just cutting a bias cut dress with a drape, but let me know. I put it in the poll for you later on in the month. Things I find really fascinating and sort of usable for us is things like this dress, and you can see that's where the pattern's really handy, because what she's basically done is a gusset sleeve on one side and the other side a raglan sleeve, but the whole dress is just made out of 2 pattern pieces, and then they wrap round. So on each side you always get a raglan sleeve and a gusset sleeve, and then she's just got a little bit of pleating around here and here to create the volume instead of darts to make it fit to your body. So it's sort of, I think, things like that which are quite clever, which we can use for our own pattern cutting. And that's based again on quarter circles. And down here, which you hopefully can see, you can see how I used to stretch the circles. So we used to cut out a circle, fold it in 4s, stitch on the grain line, and then it used to be hung with weights. So it's stretched, because that's the thing with bias, it sort of collapses onto itself, so you need to stretch it before you pattern cut it. But I'm going to talk a bit about that in the tutorials as well. Another thing with Vionnet, which I absolutely adore, and I've used it for inspiration myself, is these sort of appliques. And she did both circle skirts and what she called barrel skirts, and a barrel skirt is even more than a circle skirt. So you've got like a sort of yoke at the top, and then you got a circle skirt with some extra added on. So that's quite fascinating. But that's where you can see all couture finishes, which probably not appropriate for nowadays. But of course what you could do is use patterned fabric, or I've done some in opaque and organdy. I can show it to you later on in the month. But it's sort of quite nice how she plays again with it starting small and being bigger. So she plays very much how the body goes. And the tops again, you can see it's just lots of gathered fabrics, and then it's sort of tied together. So it's actually a very simple top cut on the bias, which just gets gathered in and tied together. And you can see actually this is a very similar dress, but out of a chiffon, so it changes the look completely. I'm just going to show you 2 more. This is one of those styles which are quite simple, but it really reminded me of the pink Valentino dress we looked at for our live lessons. So it's got these, this case the sleeves are open rather than open at the top rather than the bottom. Again, it's like really statement sleeves which come from a dropped shoulder, and then all the shaping, so it's a really fitted dress, but all the shaping is done through darts which become godets. So you get all these sort of inserts, and it creates a really flattering evening dress. But I think in a different fabric it'd be a really interesting daytime dress as well. And Alexander McQueen this season has done lots of stuff out of denim, and if you did it out of denim it'd have a completely different feel. But it's sort of, you could pick the sleeves for a top, you could recreate the whole look for a really amazing evening style, or you could just make a dress but the shaping coming out of darts. So it's clever stuff like that. And then the patterns, but not instructions, so some of them are really confusing, but what you need to do is then just use your block, and that will help you think about how to put it all together. But it's a bit of a help basically. And I just wanted to show you this one as well. So that's just a drawing, it's not this one, because it's really clever. You know, I was talking about, she used just squares on the straight, and this is literally just, I think, 3 rectangles put together, and then you end up with a really sort of very 1920s cape. So I might do a little guide just to, because that'd be a really nice day wear top, sort of, not top, like a wrap cardigan out of a knit fabric to wear with crop trousers. So these are some of the Vionnet styles I thought quite interesting, and I wanted to show you one which I, for example, thought is really hard to, you can sort of start off, if I can find it, because I wanted to do it with you, but when I was thinking, ooh, it's one of those which looks really simple, but it's actually really hard to put together. It's this one. So it's very much like the bow dress, but it comes from the top and the bottom. But I'm going to show you how the pattern pieces look like, because they're really, that's when you just see that by draping you end up with completely different styles when you do on flat patterns. So if you have looked at the bow dress tutorial, you sort of roughly know how it looks like, and then by comparison, this one, that's this dress. So you can see it's got all this of draping, but this is the pattern, and that's actually quite hard. You can flat pattern cut it, but it's quite hard where to place all this, because that's basically all the volume which gets gathered. So this is like, you know, we have the bow coming out, the tie, they use it out of the middle of the fabric, and I think that's where flat pattern, probably these pieces, gets quite tricky. I would actually then use this as a guide and probably either drape it or see how I can recreate it, but it's not something which lends itself to tutorial where I want to make it really clear for you, rather than me experimenting for an hour trying to work it out. I just want to show you for how bonkers some of the pattern, how this basically becomes a really beautiful fitted evening dress. And if the fabric was wide enough, it would be one piece, but she had to piece it together because that's the width of your fabric basically. So very complicated. To finish off, I just quickly wanted to finish the quote because I really liked it. And she said that we can be talented, rich or lucky, but I firmly believe that a successful life is made up of every day's patient work. And I think that's probably as good a quote for pattern cutting as any. So this is just a quick insight into Madeleine Vionnet. I'd love to hear from you what your favorite styles are. And then on Friday I'll be back with the handkerchief dress drafting tutorial, and then with more guides and analysis throughout the month. But that's it for me for today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.